Welcome back to the webcast. Today we are talking about college football, previewing week 1 and talking about the breaking news today. I'm Adam, that's Doug. We got our first guest on the webcast today, so let's do it. All right. Welcome back to the webcast, All Sports, One Web, the weekly sports podcast, where today we are talking about college football. Yes, we've already had some games. The backyard brawl last night was a thriller, but we got the main slate week 1 starting this weekend. How you feeling, Doug?
I'm ready for football.
Ready for college football. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right. So before we get into anything, I want to introduce our first guest onto the show, good friend of the show, Mr. Brett Magnan. He is a Notre Dame alum, and he is here to talk about the marquee matchup of the weekend, Ohio State hosting Notre Dame in the Shoe. Welcome to the show, Brett. How are we doing today?
What's up, Adam? Doing great. Adam, Doug, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to talk about Notre Dame, Ohio State, and promise I won't be biased at all towards either of the teams.
Yeah, no one here on the webcast is ever biased. Definitely not. But before we get into that, we do have to talk about the breaking college football news that broke today from the 11-person meeting about college football expansion. So here on the webcast, we like to break down every sport. We are big sports fans in general. So in college football, the current system is a 4-team playoff that is picked by a selection committee, and the first-ranked team will play the fourth-ranked team. The second-ranked team will play the third-ranked team. The winners of those would advance to the national championship game. This has been the system since 2014 in college football. Before that, they had the BCS era, and we will not get into the crazy whackhead system that was, but today was a landmark moment, especially when you consider this past spring, they had already had a meeting to extend the college football playoff to include more teams, and they denied it, which would set the date. They denied it for the change happening before the current bargaining agreement ends in 2025. So this meeting was technically for 2026 and onwards, and the 11-person committee, which includes the president of Notre Dame, unanimously voted to extend to a 12-team playoff. And the way that I understand this is that the highest ranked 6 who are conference champions will all go. The highest 4 seeds will get a bye, and then they will take 6 at large. So the highest ranked people by the selection committee that are not conference champions will advance as well. So what do we think about that, guys? An extension of the college football playoff finally, I think, for most college fans, but what are your thoughts overall?
I think it's good. I don't think 4 teams is enough. I think there's been too many, snubs to get into, teams that should have got in that didn't get in, teams that, everybody thought should have had a chance, but, maybe they lost the Big Ten championship by 1 too many touchdowns or 1 field goal too many, and it was too big of a loss. I think 12 teams is better for sure.
Yeah, I think it solves one of the largest complaints about the 4-team system. That is, the team that goes undefeated in a, mid-conference, or, debating who's the 4th, 5th best
UCF.
team. Once you get to exactly. Once you get to 12-13, I mean, at that point you're splitting hairs, and it gives the teams that, maybe have an early loss and then rebound and can't make it to their conference championship, still gives them a chance to win. I think with 4 teams, there's a chance that 2 weeks in, you knew your season was done. At this point, you have a chance till the end.
Yeah, I think especially with the super conferences that they're talking about, I mean, if you have USC, Ohio State, Michigan, and they all 3 are 1-loss teams or 2-loss teams, they all 3 should be good enough to get in. But in a 4-team system, only one of them is going to get in. So now if it's 12, you could maybe argue that a 2-loss Michigan is better than a 2-loss Texas in the SEC. And then it gets into more of, it's not, you're not just thinking, okay, well, we can't put in 3 Big Ten teams or 3 SEC teams because one of them has 2 losses, and then you have, Clemson that has 1 loss or no losses. But just the competition that they play isn't quite as good. So it's tough.
So Brett, here's a question for you as a fan of an independent, a team that does not have a home in college football in Notre Dame. Are you fearful that opening it up to 6 at-large bids, so Notre Dame obviously will not be getting those 6 conference spots, but now opening it up to 6 at-large positions, those would be the ones, if Notre Dame stays out of a conference, that you guys will be trying to go for. Are you worried now that this is going to be 6 conference champions plus the other 5 from the SEC, or do you think this helps or hurts a team like Notre Dame who's an independent?
Honestly, I think this gives Notre Dame more options. I had to scrap all my notes on what I thought they were going to do from a conference perspective as soon as this came out. And I could see it both ways, right? Notre Dame has stayed independent for so long because they love to pride themselves on their national brand. They, have their deal with NBC. They play in California. They'll play in, Ohio State. They have games with Alabama coming up. They give themselves a lot of freedom to do that independent. And, it's nice for them not to have to share the revenue with anybody. They can say it's not a financial decision. I think their athletic director even said, "Oh, we're losing money being independent," but that's not true. It's a financial gain for them. They're a national brand. With 6 at-large bids, a 2-loss Notre Dame is going to be in the top 12. I mean, there's not an argument for that. Assuming they didn't lose to an FCS team, they're going to be in the top 12. So, and beyond that, is a 3-loss Notre Dame even worth going to the playoffs? So you're just going to get your butt kicked by Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. So I think it only helps their chances. Now, with that being said, you look at the conference they align with the most, the ACC. If you're telling me that I could join the ACC and all I have to do is either upset Clemson or beat a Pitt or a Florida State, and all of a sudden I'm in potentially with a bye, that's tempting.
Yeah. So you look at, Doug, as a Michigan fan, historic rivalry with Notre Dame. And are you concerned as Michigan kind of being in these, in the Big Ten, which is going to be one of these super conferences, having to play teams like USC, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, every single year, and maybe getting 2 or 3 losses, whereas Notre Dame every single year with their kind of schedule, they will play 2 or 3 kind of big powerhouse teams. But even if they were to lose, in the past, even if they've lost 1 or 2 of those games, they still ended up finishing in those top 12 spots and most likely will be getting a berth. But are you kind of upset at a team like Notre Dame who would kind of almost try to exploit the system now with a 12-team playoff versus Michigan, who's going to be playing in a much harder conference and actually being a part of a conference?
Well, let me get one thing straight. I've always been upset with Notre Dame. They should have been in the Big Ten for 40 years now. But no, if we can go to 12 teams, I'm not as mad because a 3-loss Michigan with a loss to, a top 10 Michigan State, a top 10 Ohio State, a top 10 Wisconsin, we could still potentially get in as long as we're not getting blown out in those games. If they're all close games, then, now we have 12 teams. We have a chance. They won't just completely write us off because we came in 3rd in the Big Ten East. Instead of it's a lot. There's just so much more room for good teams to get in and have a chance. Not all of the teams that are going to be 3-loss teams, I bet you not many of them win the championship, but a lot of them could get through that first round.
Yeah.
Maybe knock off in Alabama or something every so often. There's going to be why they play the games, but if they never play those lower teams, I think it's good.
Yeah, I think personally that having that 6th conference champion, I think, was a very key point to add to this. So last year, if you look at it, Cincinnati would have been that 6th team. Obviously, they finished in the top 4 anyway, would have gotten a bye. But as we move forward, And, teams like Cincinnati are moving to the Big 12 anyway. So you really look at that Group of 5 conference, and you're really going to be giving someone the flag to run into this playoff with, as one of them will automatically be making it as the highest ranked of those Group of 5 conferences. I think is a great point to see that kind of stuff where, you're going to get they might be the 12th seed against the 5th seed, but, you never know, they might be able to upset it. But speaking back on conferences, so the Big Ten, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about it on last week's show, announced a $1 billion deal with NBC, Fox, and CBS every year. Big Ten football is going to be on those 3 networks moving forward from 2023. Notre Dame, as Brett mentioned earlier, had an exclusive deal, which is why whenever you open your NBC Sports app, all you saw was Notre Dame and ice skating. It was ridiculous, but it was for that exclusive deal. Now, NBC has jumped ship to the Big Ten, and Notre Dame does not have exclusive rights with NBC anymore. You mentioned that the ACC, the conference that you did end up joining and almost won a couple years ago, is you kind of closely aligned. But with USC, Michigan, 2 of your historical rivalries, going to be in the Big Ten 2024, do you want Notre Dame to be joining the Big Ten by 2024?
I've got a different answer as a fan of football and a fan of Notre Dame. Do I want to see a bunch of really good football games? I would love Notre Dame to join the Big Ten. I mean, would our chances of making the playoffs be harder? Yes. But having a year where I could go to a Notre Dame, Ohio State game, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, all those teams, USC still, throw in their other rivalries. They always play Navy. They always, throw in a couple other teams. That would be a fun season. It's nice to rack up a win against Marshall where the game's out of hand by the second quarter, but it's by the second quarter, you're not paying attention. So it would be really fun to join. But if you have to play, if Michigan State is your easy game, you're screwed. You're lucky if you lose 4.
Yeah. So back on that, we talked a little about this last week, Doug. As a conference, now you have a 12-team playoff, 4 teams get a bye. Those 4 teams are going to be playing 2 games in the playoff like they normally would. But the others, if they do advance all the way to the finals, will be playing in a 16th game as it stands right now. So with these super conferences coming in and an extended playoff on top of that, are you in favor of getting rid of these, 3 preseason games to start the season, non-conference kind of gimme games?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think instead of having 3, just because there are so many out of conference rivalries like the Notre Dame USC or Notre Dame Michigan, we can keep those games. But they don't always have to be week 1. Maybe they could be week 5 if it worked. They could work it out in the schedule or something. But those games are awesome, so I don't want to see those ones go because they're so historic and they're just so much fun to watch. But I do think if they're going to start playing more games, they can't just keep making the season longer. So I think cut down those easy games where, like we were saying last week, Alabama plays Northwest, South Texas, and it just doesn't make any sense, and they kill them in the first half.
Hey, it's called the University of Texas, okay?
Yeah, exactly. But I think maybe if we just cut those games down, especially if we're going to have the super conferences, your easy game is going to be in the Big Ten when you get Indiana and Maryland and Rutgers. That's your easy games. So there's no need to have 5 easy games if you have 2 of those teams on the schedule. So that's what I think. I think keep the the big rivalries, so you maybe have the 1 out of conference game, but the rest of them I think should just be make it to the playoffs and you'll play more.
Yeah. I'm excited about the format overall. I think we all, as college football fans overall, I think are excited about the expansion. So hopefully, again, it's supposed to be 2026. I personally think that they're going to get it in by 2024. I think there's too much demand for it, especially when something this year goes wrong, as it always does, and people start yelling out for expansion. I think, 2023 might be too soon, but 2024, I think, definitely will be there. But Before we get to 2024, we have to do this season. And week 1 has some great marquee matchups. We got Georgia not hosting, but still hosting Oregon because they're just driving 20 miles south to Atlanta to take on Georgia, or to take on Oregon. But the marquee matchup of the weekend, I think, will be number 2, Ohio State hosting number 5, Notre Dame. A big reason why Brett was kind enough to join us today to talk about this game. So as a Notre Dame fan, you play 3 big games this season. You got us, Ohio State, the first week, and at the end of the season, you got USC and Clemson. But what are your thoughts for tomorrow?
I think it's a bold decision by Notre Dame to start out the season at Ohio State. I mean, there is a lot of turnover on the Notre Dame roster. I think they've got a talented roster. I think they're going to have a great year. Imagine being a quarterback who's thrown 30 career passes. A lot of talent. He was Tyler Buckner, Notre Dame's quarterback, was recruited as a very athletic quarterback. He can run, he can throw. The horseshoe for your first game is a tremendous way to start your Notre Dame career, or a great way to ruin it. I mean, that is going to be a difficult environment for a new quarterback, a new running back, new wide receivers. They have a lot of inexperience in offense. That is going to be challenged.
Yeah, and Marcus Freeman, new head coach at Notre Dame, been there a couple of years, but his first year taking over the reins for Brian Kelly. Cannot believe he left the way he did, and that accent still haunts me when he went to introduce at LSU. Oh, still haunts me. But Doug, you've watched Michigan play some very great games against Ohio State, including last year's season finale in the snow up in Ann Arbor, where Michigan just ran the ball 5 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards, touchdown, 5 yards, 4 yards throughout the entire game. Oregon did something similar to start the season. Do you think, what is for you the key for Notre Dame to be able to leave a place like the shoe at night, opening night of the season, with a victory?
No turnovers.
No
turnovers. The horseshoe goes insane when something big happens. They got to limit the big plays, which is nearly impossible against Ohio State. They have so much talent and so much speed. It's almost impossible to eliminate all big plays, but they cannot turn the ball over if they want to have a chance, especially with being inexperienced. If your quarterback gets rattled in the first half, good luck, because Ohio State does not slow down. They will put up 55 on any team that is slipping. So that's what I think. Basically, just no turnovers and limit the big plays.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be hard now with Jim Knowles coming in, new defensive coordinator for Ohio State, coming over from his great job that he did at Oklahoma State. And I think one of the biggest issues last year obviously was the defense, but I think even more so than that was the fact that Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimalau, 2 highly rated prospects for Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball, defensive, rushers, at least JT, he made his decision like 3 weeks before school started in the summer, or before camp started. I don't think he got good reps. A lot of kids usually nowadays are joining in January for like spring ball and getting that early enrollment to kind of get up to speed. Both of them now, watching some clips of them, have put on some serious weight with a new Jim Knowles defense that is just going to have the talent of Ohio State flying all over the place in a night game, in a home opener. I think it's going to be very difficult for a team to not turn the ball over. So if they go ahead and do that, and, first of all, I'll get your opinion on this, Brett, but a 2-part question. First part is a 5th-ranked team that is a 17.5-point underdog. I don't know when the last time we saw that was. And the second part was, even if it is a blowout or Notre Dame goes home with a close loss, what do you think your chances are of making the college football playoff, and what would they need to do in order to do it?
So if it's a blowout, Notre Dame's got a big hill to climb. If it's a close loss, people love to talk about the good loss. You especially early in the year, and the fact that Notre Dame plays Clemson and USC at the end of the year. If they lose to Ohio State, beat Clemson, beat USC, and look good doing it, no one's going to be thinking about this loss. So I don't think they need to worry about that. I think, to Doug's point, they need to limit the mistakes, but I'd like to see Notre Dame try to make a splash early. I think with Brian Kelly, sometimes Notre Dame fell into the trap where we'd run the ball twice on first and second down, even if it wasn't working, throw up a little heave on third down, punt the ball. And it would take us 2 quarters to get into the rhythm. If you do that, the crowd is going to be insane. I would love to see Buckner 2-3 plays in, go for the long bomb, silence the crowd, make them think, okay, we got the new defensive coordinator, but the defensive problems are still there. Make them think that, even if it's not true, and get in their heads. Because if you're playing from behind, you're not going to win.
Yeah, one thing that Oregon was able to do well, even Michigan too, but Oregon, especially early in the season last year, going into the shoe, getting a victory, was really staying right there the whole game. They were never behind, never had to play catch up really, and definitely you need it, especially away from home in the shoe. And Notre Dame get the advantage of being a night game too. And as someone who's been there at a night game, it gets insane. 100,000 people with the walls that are the shoe, keeping the sound in. Man, I almost tripped just walking down the field for my graduation because it's intimidating and there was no one in the stands. But we'll see it tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m.
Definitely don't want to get behind against Ohio State. You'd be and have it turn into a shootout.
Right.
They don't lose many shootouts.
Yeah, Notre Dame doesn't win too many shootouts, so I'd like to stay out of that.
Yeah.
I'd also like to see Marcus Freeman adjust. I think he's going to be an excellent coach for Notre Dame. He is you like to throw out the term, the player's coach. He's high-fiving players. You watch the video of him getting announced as the head coach, and they're mobbing in the locker room. I don't remember seeing a video of that for Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly took the CEO approach, and, we can mock him for his fake Southern accent and for his standoffishness, but he did a lot of great things for Notre Dame over the last 10 years. He brought them from an average 5-loss team to winning 10 games consistently. He didn't get that final hurdle, but he did a lot of great things. So it's something to say about his coaching style. It's going to be interesting to see how Marcus Freeman continues with the Notre Dame program. I think he looked really, really impressive in the first half against Oklahoma State in his one game he's coached. They looked really bad in the second half. Oklahoma State went to the locker room, adjusted, and scored 23 straight points. If Ohio State, let's say by some miracle, Notre Dame is controlling the game through the first half, they are going to adjust. They have very good coaches and very good players. If you do the same thing, they're going to score 43. So you can't be complacent in your second game as a head coach.
Yeah, and I feel like, and we'll get to our predictions here from the webcast in a little bit, but I think that's going to be a theme throughout college football. Just, it is pretty much every single year, but I feel like this year more than ever, there's a lot of teams that are going through some sort of transition, whether that's a new head coach, a new starting quarterback, and especially with a lot of these marquee matchups that might have college football playoff implications early on in the season. I think the way that if you can squeak by with a win now and make your adjustments later and get stronger as the year goes on, I think it's definitely going to, give you the best chance of actually getting in. But before we go to our overall predictions for the season, I need predictions for tomorrow night. Doug, we'll start with you. Your overall prediction for Ohio State versus Notre Dame.
I think it's going to be a good game in the first half. And then I think Ohio State's going to start showing that they're Ohio State. I think a 42-28 Ohio State.
Okay. Cover the spread, cover the spread. That's not too bad. Brett, what do you think for your Fighting Irish?
They're definitely covering the spread. I think what's going to happen is they are going to get behind early. They're going to hold pace, score a late touchdown to make it a one-score game, and lose. So I'm talking touchdown with a minute left to lose by 7, 35-28.
All right. All right. So, as Brett said, we do not have any bias here on the webcast. And my prediction for tomorrow night is Ohio State cover in the first half. I think this is going to be, sadly, a statement game for Ohio State after last year's Oregon game. New defensive coordinator. I think these players are ready to go. They're ready to fly around. They're ready to let loose. I think over the years, we have been known for our edge rushers, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, list goes on. We have been dropping in sacks every year the last couple years. A new defensive switch, but still the same elite level of talent. Sadly for Notre Dame, to start off a head coach and a starting court at a night game, the shoe, I don't think is very helpful, which is why I think it bodes well for Ohio State to start off very fast. And we have a lot of people returning, especially on the offensive side of the ball. When you look at CJ Stroud and Trevion Henderson and Marvin Harrison and Smith and Jigba and Julian Fleming, and list goes on for the offensive weapons that are returning. So I think that this game will be pretty much over at halftime. Sadly, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see anything but Ohio State win. And again, we are not biased here on the webcast, but that is definitely one of the marquee matchups. But there is also another one. And that would be Georgia hosting Oregon. So here on the webcast, we love to make predictions. We love to make picks. So here, Doug, Brett, and I are going to give you our 4 teams that will make the college football playoff, as well as our eventual national champion. We have here the list of the contenders, current teams they ranked inside the top 15. Teams that are in the AP poll to start week 1. So Georgia taking on Oregon, definitely one of the big matchups, I think, to start this season, because the SEC is known to be the team that always gets 2 out of the 4 spots. And the reason why is their second best team, usually Georgia, that doesn't win the SEC championship, it outweighs either the Pac-12, the 12 and the Big 12 champion. So Georgia hosting Oregon in this game, I think, can go a long way in indicating whether or not that will be the case this year. Do you think, Doug, with Oregon having a new head coach, and who is actually the defensive coordinator from last year from Georgia, moving to Eugene, Oregon, to take over that program, do you think that Oregon has any chance against the defending champions, or do you think Georgia will take this one?
Georgia wins. I think it'll be a good game, but I think Georgia wins.
Yeah, right. And so for me, I guess I would say then that if Oregon loses that game, I don't give them much chance in a Pac-12 with Utah to make the college football playoff with that one loss to Georgia on the resume. Do you guys agree with that one?
Yeah, I think they're going to lose to USC as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. All right, let's see here. So, all right, let's see here. How do we want to do this? Let's go with Clemson. Okay, so I'll give this one to you, Brett. So Clemson, they are 10-3 last year. They did not win the ACC. They have Notre Dame at the end of the schedule here. Do you give Notre Dame a chance to beat Clemson at the end of the season, given Marcus Freeman and Tyler, kind of couple games to get settled in as starting new head coach, and starting quarterback? Do you think Notre Dame are going to be able to topple Clemson and end their college football playoff hopes?
I've predicted one Notre Dame loss on this webcast. I'm not going to predict a second. So I think Notre Dame's got Clemson. I think, I'll never be able to pronounce his name, but DJ Uiagalelei proved himself last year to maybe not be the 5-star gem everyone thought he was. And I don't think Clemson's as good as they have been over the last couple of years. Are they still a good team? Yes, for sure. I think it's going to be a very difficult matchup, but by then, Notre Dame's biggest flaw will be not gone, because, they'll still be young guys, but they'll have 7-8 games under their belt. I think Notre Dame's going to beat Clemson. with that being said, I think Clemson, that has a shot of being their only loss. I don't think, their team that beat them, Pitt, is as good as they were last year. I think Clemson has a chance to go 11-1 and win the ACC and make a potential argument for number 4.
Okay, so if Clemson ends up as a one-loss ACC champion, and Notre Dame, like you said, ends up as, let's say, a one-loss independent, but their only loss was to Ohio State, and they ended up beating Clemson. I feel like the committee would have to give the edge to Notre Dame, especially if they end up playing well. That game would happen only a couple weeks before the end of the season.
And they play USC.
And they play USC.
Team with a USC and a Clemson win.
Mm-hmm.
And their only losses to Ohio State, it's really hard not to put them in as long as they don't slip up against any of the other games.
Which they love doing. So I'm not going to count that one out. But
yeah, you can expect slip-ups against USC and Clemson, but them to squeak by and win, maybe not look great because they're tough teams.
Right.
But if they're slipping up against the lower teams, then that's when you got to kind of say, well, maybe is Notre Dame worth it? But if they blow them all out and then they win, they're only lost to Ohio State, then you have to put them in.
Agreed.
All right, so I'll give this one to you, Doug, to kind of settle the score here. So Notre Dame's third game, as you mentioned, Notre Dame versus USC, will take place near the end of the season as well. Who do you have in that one?
I think USC is going to win that game. I think it's going to be a really good game. But saying that, I think Notre Dame's going to be a 2-loss team. I think they're going to lose to Ohio State and USC, and I think they'll beat Clemson. But I don't know enough about Notre Dame. But if you're talking to me now, I'm going to say that I think USC will beat them.
Brett, are those fighting words? USC taking down Notre Dame?
I'm not surprised the Michigan guy thinks Notre Dame's going to lose, so I won't take it too personally. But no, it's been fun when Notre Dame and USC are both good teams. USC has not beaten Notre Dame for a very long time. And so is it going to happen this year? Who knows? But they've got a new coach. They've got a new quarterback. They've got a lot of talent there. And I think the last couple of years of maybe people have forgotten how good USC can be, but they can be a very, very good team. And so I think anything can happen in that game. I'm biased. I think Notre Dame's got enough to take them, but you never know with a USC team that has talent.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm very excited to see Lincoln Riley jumping ship at Oklahoma, taking Caleb Williams over with him. They have double-digit amount of transfers going into USC.
The Blitnikoff winner.
Oh yeah, from
Addison.
Pitt, right? Yeah. How he won that last year is still a little beyond me, but good for him. Not to take anything away from him, but three-headed monster at Ohio State, and none of them even got a shout at that one. Quite interesting. I'm not bitter. I am not bitter, I swear. Yeah, right, exactly. So we are teetering here. Notre Dame 1-loss, 2-loss here. So we will leave them where they are for now, and let's dive in to Lincoln Riley's old team and the Big 12. We got Oklahoma, Baylor, and Texas here. Two teams really still going through some transition. Texas have Quinn Ewers now going to be the starting quarterback there, one of the highest ranked quarterbacks. He got a 1.0 rating or 100 rating, however you want to look at it, as a 5-star recruit. Ended up going early to Ohio State out of high school to get his NIL money, said peace to Ohio State, and now went back home to Texas, where he'll be the starting quarterback under Sark's second year there. Oklahoma hires the wonderful Brent Vrabels, the former defensive coordinator for Clemson, who had just did a remarkable job there. And now he's the new head coach at Oklahoma. They are going through losing both Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams at quarterback, but Oklahoma, 6 out of the last 7 Big 12 champions. And then we have Baylor, who, only won the whole thing last year. So I'll start with you, Brett, on this one. Texas take on Alabama in week 2. Both of them, kind of a little bit of cupcakes so to speak, in week 1, predicted to be 1-0 going into that week 2 matchup. How big of a game do you think that is on college football playoff? And how do you think Texas can do against Alabama?
That is going to be a huge game for Texas because they've had so many seasons over the last couple of years where, people say, is Texas back? This is the year they can be another good team again. And if they can beat Alabama, they've proven they deserve to be back. They have the quarterback. They have the talent. I love Texas. My family lived in Austin for a few years, so I got to like the team and everything about them. And I've had my heart broken by them too many times to trust that they can beat Alabama. I don't even think the game's going to be close. Alabama, year in, year out, is head and shoulders above most of their competition. I think that's what's going to happen in week 2, unfortunately.
All right. So Texas take a loss there in week 2. But I will go to you, Doug, here. Which team out of these 3 do you think will actually end up winning the Big 12, or do you think someone else, maybe an Oklahoma State or something like that, will end up winning the Big 12?
I think Oklahoma State's always a pretty good team. They always seem to have a really, really good team. But Central Michigan almost beat them last night. They gave them a run for their money. Granted, it's week 1, but it's Central Michigan. And so I don't know. I really do like Oklahoma State. I think Baylor is too good. I'm curious to see how Oklahoma does with losing so many people. The whole transfer portal with the NIL money, it's hard to follow all of these players. I mean, there's so many teams. It's not like the NFL. There's so many teams. But I think Baylor's going to win it all.
All right. So we have here Texas going to lose to Alabama, Baylor going to be the Big 12 champions. So I will go ahead and remove Oklahoma from the contenders list to the fall off list, where they will not have a chance by the end of the season to make the college football playoff. And Brett, your temporary family home of Austin versus Baylor, do either of these 2 teams make the college football playoff for you this year?
I don't know if this is a long shot. I think Baylor's got it. I think they looked really good at the end of last year, and it's been a while since we've had a Baylor team that's competed at that national level, and I think this is going to be the year that they take that next step. We've had a lot of consistency in the playoffs. You've seen Alabama a lot of years. You've seen Ohio State a lot of years. I think this is the year that a team makes it for the first time.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Blake Shapen, 23 of 28 last year in the Big 12 championship game against Jim Knowles, 5th ranked defense, or they're a top defense, but 5th ranked Oklahoma State. So he's returning. Only going to expect more big things from them. I could totally see Baylor giving a shout to make the college football playoff. Now let's move over to the Pac-12, where we have gotten rid of Oregon here, going through a lot of changes, as well as that early season game to Georgia may put them a little bit behind. So we're going to put them still here in this fall off category. But I am like Doug, and I am high on USC this year. Obviously, Utah returning Cam Rising with the performance that they had in the Pac-12 last year, as well as the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. They can put up numbers, but I do like USC to make some noise in the Pac-12. But Doug, if you had to pick between USC and Utah, who do you have winning the Pac-12 this year?
They're both good. I could see it going either way, but I think it'll probably be Utah, because USC might lose to Notre Dame. So I think, Utah doesn't have that other tough game on their schedule. So I think Utah will take it. All
right. So Utah, maybe being a one loss, or maybe going undefeated, we have as going to be the Pac-12 champions. We will leave them here in the contenders for right now, as we move on to the SEC. So we got, obviously, last year, Texas A&M taking care of business against Alabama in the regular season. All of the beautiful drama that unfolded this summer between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban is going to set the stage nicely for when A&M have to go into Tuscaloosa and try and repeat that feat. And obviously Georgia losing 15 players in the NFL draft, most of them in the first 2 rounds, with that great defense, obviously being the defending national champions in on the S side, always with a shout. Do we see anything besides an Alabama-Georgia SEC matchup here this season?
I don't think so. I think that it's already set in stone. You might as well just book your flights now to go see that game. That's, to me, that's just what it's going to be. Bryce Young is way too good. I just think he'll carry that team.
Yeah, Brett. So Bryce Young, the returning Heisman, finally someone who is returning to school with the Heisman Trophy, giving them a shot at actually being the second player to get 2 of those awards after Archie Griffin did it 60 odd years ago. Do you see anything besides an Alabama-Georgia SEC championship game? And do you think that Georgia can actually do it again and beat Alabama in 2 consecutive games?
As boring as it sounds, I don't think so. I think Alabama, Georgia have this on lock. Georgia did lose a lot of players to the NFL draft, but that's the beauty of college football, is there's always a redshirt freshman or a sophomore who we don't know him now, but we're sure as heck going to know him in 10 games. And both of those schools recruit so well, coach so well. They just do it year over year, and I think it's going to be the 2 of them. Unfortunately, I do think it's going to be Alabama again, but who knows? Wasn't last year.
Right. And, just like last year, it was Michigan out of the Big Ten, their first time making the college football playoff. What a performance against Ohio State to clinch that spot in the Big Ten championship game, and then wiping the floor with Iowa in that game to get them their first shot at the national championship in the college football era. Doug, as a Michigan fan, how are your hopes on Michigan returning to the college football playoff this year?
We won't. I mean, when our coach says we're going to start one quarterback in week 1, and regardless of what happens, we're going to start the other quarterback in week 2.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know he said that.
We have J.J. McCarthy, a sophomore, and we have Cade McNamara, who was our quarterback all of last year. I personally think J.J. McCarthy is a much better athlete, and I think he's going to be a much better quarterback. I don't think Cade McNamara can win us any games. How did we beat Ohio State? We ran the ball.
And it was snowing.
If we don't run the ball, then we don't win the game, because we don't have a quarterback or those, the 3-headed monster receivers. We don't have that. Not right now. I mean, maybe we will. I'm not sure. But we didn't have that last year, and I think J.J. McCarthy could make something happen, and we lost our offensive coordinator, thankfully, and maybe we will get some better play calling this year. But I don't think so. I don't think anybody's going to be able to beat Ohio State this year.
All right. Brett, you have a close victory against the number 5 ranked team in the country for Ohio State on their opening weekend. Do you see Ohio State taking that momentum and moving forward, and having to travel to Lansing to take on Michigan State, where they played a close game last year in Columbus, and getting Michigan at home? Do you think Ohio State can actually run the table and be the representative from the Big Ten in the college football playoff?
I think they're going to do it. I think the line at the Ohio State Notre Dame game is a little ridiculous, but you don't get to be 17-point favorites over the number 5 team in the nation by luck. They have so much returning talent, and they have so much talent that I probably don't even know of yet because they haven't played a game. They are, as I said, I think they're going to beat Notre Dame. I think they're going to handle Michigan and Michigan State, and they're going to be all ready for the playoffs.
All right. So we have a SEC championship game between Alabama and Georgia. We have Baylor winning the Big 12. We have Ohio State winning the Big 10. We have Utah coming out of the Pac-12, Clemson out of the ACC, and Notre Dame playing 3 high-quality opponents and holding their own and being there right at the end of the season after beating Clemson and maybe being a 1 or 2 loss team, but right in the mix at the end of the season. So we are going to go straight through this list here. And I will start basically the way that this is going to work. I will give each of you a team, and you will tell me if they will be in the college football playoff or they will not be in the college football playoff. And if there are already 4 teams that we have in to the make college football playoff tier, then and you want to add your team into it, you will need to tell me which team gets kicked out, if that makes sense. So I will start with Doug. And give you Alabama. Is Alabama making the college football playoff this year?
Absolutely.
You need any defense or any convincing there, Brett, on that one?
I think I'll buy it.
Okay. And I will have Georgia for myself here. I agree with both of you guys. I think Georgia will be playing Alabama in the SEC championship game. I think Florida will have a good win under their belt because I actually think Florida versus Utah will be a very good game. Florida hasn't lost a game in the swamp to start the season in 17, 18 years. Utah flying across the country for that game, I think, will be difficult. So I think Florida may have a shout there for a little bit. It'll be an interesting game to see in Jacksonville when Georgia takes on Florida. But I think Georgia will be in the SEC championship game. I think Alabama will wipe the floor with them as a revenge a game for the national title game. They seem to like to play the team that they lost to the season before and beat them handily. So I will actually be kicking Georgia out of this year's college football playoff, even if they only have 1 loss. I don't think that they will make it this year. Brett, that gives you Baylor. So we have Baylor here. Do you think, as we predicted as being the Big 12 champions, that they will be in the college football playoff this year?
I think there's a lot of talent in the Big 12, and I think if Baylor can walk away as champions, even as a 1-loss champion, I think that puts them in the playoffs. So I think they are going to squeak in. It might be the 4 seed, but I think Baylor's making it to the playoffs.
All right, there we go. Baylor are in as the second team for our college football playoff predictions. Doug, we are back to you with Ohio State, the second-ranked team in the country going into the year. In my opinion, I think they could have up to 3 players in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony this year. Are Ohio State, as our Big Ten representative, going to be in the college football playoff this year?
I've gotten 2 easy ones. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Sorry, we saved the hardest one for you, which is last. So there's our third team. So we got 3 teams in and 3 teams fighting for that last spot. And this next one is me, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier. Florida will take on Utah here to start the season. That game, the Rose Bowl last year, was very back and forth, a lot of offense. And I fully believe in Utah as being a contender for the Pac-12 this year. I think they have the possibility of doing great things. But I think early loss to Florida, games against Oregon and USC, still always going to be a little bit tricky. I think they could fall to a 2 or 3 loss team this year. And because of some of these other conference games where you got Georgia taking on Oregon, for example, can really sway the voters to think less of the Pac-12, even though maybe they shouldn't. And for that reason, I think that Utah will not make the college football playoff this year. Brett, we leave this one of Clemson to you as our ACC champion. You predict that Notre Dame will beat Clemson at the end of the season here, but they will still end up being the ACC champion. So maybe a 1-loss Clemson. Will they get into the college football playoff this year?
Adam, you're making me, as a Notre Dame fan, choose between my own team and Clemson, my brain and my heart here. So this is a difficult one. I think, honestly, it depends what Notre Dame does. I think if Notre Dame makes themselves a contender, regardless of whether or not Clemson's the ACC championship, if they've lost to Notre Dame, they don't have the right to go in over them. That being said, Notre Dame has a lot of tough games on their schedule, and I think a one-loss Clemson to Notre Dame still might get in over them, as silly as that may be. So I think I'm putting Clemson in the top 4.
All right, so there it is, 4 teams into the college football playoff. And Doug, we leave Notre Dame in your hands to overwrite what Brett has decided here with Clemson making the college football playoff. We have Alabama, Baylor, and Ohio State, along with Clemson, in. Notre Dame is the remaining team. Do you put them into the college football playoff with a loss to Ohio State, but possible victories over both USC and Clemson later in the year? And if so, who do you take out of the college football playoff?
I don't think so. I think that they may be a 2-loss team. They may beat Clemson or they may beat USC. But I don't know. I mean, those are tough games. So I think that they'll fall out. But next year, with a full year under their belt, with all their players getting more experience and having a full year under their belt, then I think they could be a serious problem. But this year, I think, too many young guys, a brand new head coach. I think it'll be a good year for Notre Dame, but it won't be, a historic year for Notre Dame.
Okay, so there we have it. We have our 4 teams. Now we will do some ranking here. Do we think Alabama, based on our results so far, we think Alabama is pretty much going to run the table? As a result of doing that, we will keep them at the number 1 spot. Who do we think will be the number 2 team making the college football playoff?
Ohio State.
Wearing their jersey.
Yeah, Ohio State, only because they didn't start the year ranked number 1.
Okay, so you think, so them as well running the table. I can't switch these, can I? There we go. Which would then leave Baylor and Clemson, who we both think can pick up a loss this year. Do we have both of them as conference champions, though? Who do you have, Brett, ahead, either Baylor or Clemson?
I think there's more talent in the Big 12 than there is in the ACC this year, and so because of that, I think I give the edge to Baylor.
Yeah, purely on strength of schedule, I pick Baylor as number 3.
All right, so that would be a Alabama-Clemson semifinal and a Ohio State-Baylor semifinal. So I will give, because Doug picked Alabama to make the college football playoff, I will give Alabama-Clemson to you, Brett. Who do you got in that semifinal matchup?
I think from what I said earlier and why I think Notre Dame is going to beat Clemson, I don't think they necessarily have as strong of a quarterback as we all thought they were going to when he first committed to Clemson. I don't think he's going to have the ability to overcome Alabama's always solid defense. And for the first time, well, they had him last year, but for the first time in a long time, Alabama has an amazing quarterback. And I think they're going to ride that to the championship.
All right.
So that is.
We will put Alabama as a lock to make the college football championship this year. The other semifinal game will be Baylor and Ohio State. Doug, who do you have winning that one?
Ohio State.
Ohio State.
I think it's going to take a miracle for somebody on Ohio State's schedule to beat them. They're going to be so good this year. Barring no injuries or anything crazy happening, they're going to be such a good team.
All right. So we have a rematch of the title game from a couple years ago, Alabama and Ohio State. Alabama come in as the preseason number 1 for the 7th time under Nick Saban at Alabama. The previous 6 times, 5 out of the previous 6 times they've failed to win the national championship game. The only time they did it was in 2017. where they beat Clemson in the run to that national championship, as well as we have predicted here. Ohio State come in as the preseason number 2 team. Ryan Day has a 1 win, 2 loss record in the college football playoff after Ohio State missed it last year and played in the Rose Bowl against Utah. What's so beautiful about a 3-person panel is we get to decide who's going to win the national title game. Brett, I will start with you. Who do you got between Alabama and Ohio State?
Thank goodness. I thought you were going to make me be the tiebreaker. So I'm picking Alabama. I think Ohio State has a lot of weapons on offense, and I think Alabama has a strong enough defense, maybe not to shut them down, but just to slow them down. And I think with their offensive strength, they're going to take to an Ohio State that doesn't have bad defense, but it's not going to be what they're known for. So I'm picking Alabama in this one. I think it'll be a good game, though.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but a little bit of playoff history between these two teams, obviously playing in the first semifinal of the inaugural college football playoff. Ohio State winning that one, only for Alabama to get revenge in the final a couple of years ago, beating Ohio State as, oh my gosh, what's his name? The wide receiver. Oh my goodness. Just ran wild. I don't even remember how many yards he ended up with. Devontae Smith, sorry. Not Devontae Smith. Yeah, Devontae Smith. Heisman winner. Yeah, him. Mm-hmm. So a lot of great games there. So I will take the second vote of our 3 votes here. And I agree. I think Alabama, Nick Saban coined last year as a rebuilding year. They only made the college football playoff. So it's tough rebuilding year. And not only did they did that, but they then end up making the final as well. So that's it's a pretty good rebuilding year for them, returning the Heisman Trophy winner. But I feel like losing a couple weapons on offense. I think their defense will be better, more experienced. So that will be a tougher nut to crack for anyone going up against Alabama. But I'm going to follow the trend here where since 2000, only 2 teams have started off the season as ranked number 1 and went on to win the national championship. And Alabama getting the kiss of death with that one this year, I think I think that it's just not going to fall their way. And so I got Ohio State to beat Alabama in the college football playoff championship game. Doug, you are our tiebreaker. Who do you got, Alabama or Ohio State?
Oh man, I think both points are good points. I think Alabama is going to have a really good defense, but the thing I like about Ryan Day the most is that he will change at halftime, and Ohio State can look lazy and tired and slow, and then they come out at halftime and they're an entirely different team. And I don't know what he does in the locker room to these guys, scares them. I don't know. But that takes a certain level of coach to do that Michigan doesn't have. With Jim Harbaugh, I've never really seen anything substantial happen at halftime. Maybe a game plan, change, but never an attitude change where the whole atmosphere is just completely different. The thing with Alabama, though, is they never seem to have a bad half. They never seem to need that pep talk. But I think Heisman winner C.J. Stroud is going to take Ohio State in this game.
Wow. All right. So that you have it. Ohio State will be the college football national champions. Don't even need to watch the season. We'll see you in January with Petty coming down. No need to watch it. We already got the gear ready to go. National champions. Here we go. Let's go. Thank you, Brett, for joining us. This is the webcast. We will be back next week with the NFL, Premier League, Champions League, and college football, recapping week 1, the marquee games. Stay with us Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. And until next time, we will see you later.
See you guys.